handful of,
That's me. I did that.
okay, recording in progress. I have to leave if I'm here. Some of you know who we are, and we've met a number of you. Our office, we're out of West Hartford, and I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you about the progress that we've made so far with the concept design for Broadbrook Elementary and then the East Windsor Middle School High School project. I want to stress that what you're seeing today and what you have probably already looked at is just that. It's progress. It's not by any stretch a completed product. We aren't necessarily coming here to advocate for one direction or another. We want to present where we are with things and garner feedback from the group so that the next couple of weeks we can continue to sort of refine the work that we've already accomplished. So we're looking forward to showing you sort of what we've come up with so far and then getting some of the feedback and comments, listening to the concerns that you may have. Before I go, well, you should introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, my name is Matthew Gallerani, the project manager on this job for GWW Architects. So I'll be working with you guys and the town closely to develop this project.
I should also, John, if you want to introduce yourself too.
John Scheib, I'm with Northeast Collaborative Architects, and we're based in Middletown. And we're teamed with GWWO on this project so that as the project moves forward and we need to look at the state reimbursement component of this, that's one of our main roles is to review development of the plans and see how we can help to make sure that the process of the actual application for grant reimbursement goes as smoothly and as predictably as can be.
Yep, thank you. So our plan for today is we have, what we hope is maybe 15 minutes or so of presenting really sort of three options. One for Broadbrook Elementary, which is a renovation, renovate to new. And then two separate approaches for the middle school, high school, one renovate to new and one new construction. So we'll go through those and present that. We ask that if you can hold your questions, if you need to ask it, maybe we would park it and then we could address it later, but we might answer those questions along the way. And then once we sort of get through the slides, which there aren't many of them, we can always jump back and forth as need be for reference to try and provide a little bit more context, if that's okay. Before I go further, can the folks that are remote, can they hear me okay? Thumbs up. Well, I can't see you, but yes, no. All right, hearing nothing, I'm going to assume that's a yes. So anyway, so that's the plan for tonight. I don't know how much time we have. Sort of.
Oh, the meeting is 6 to 8, so.
We'll be done well.
I'm hoping so. There are other things on the agenda.
Yes, I know. So we'll try to be brief. So if we can go to the next slide. Advance. Okay, so before we get into the details, I just we're going to be looking at a number of sort of diagrammatic slides today, and be looking at things sort of at a very high level. So we have rooms and spaces laid out, but the goal here is to really sort of focus on the broader approach. There'll be time for sort of more detail a little bit later on. So I ask that if you do have questions about sort of detail level, we can address those, but we might say, hey, you know what, that's something for a discussion in a couple of weeks. So we really want to sort of focus on the overall building organization for these different options. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So yeah, so we're going to start with Broadbrook Elementary School and renovate to new concept that's going on there. So we took, as Eric said, a high level approach at the beginning here to start looking at the existing building and how we could begin to conceptually break this up into a couple different wings, one being a pre-primary wing, another being a primary wing, and a special education wing, and that the culmination of all those shared spaces and admin in the center. You'll also see down at the bottom there, we are proposing to relocate the main entrance back to where it originally was off of Rye Street here across the street. We think there's a couple of benefits that I'll get into in a moment. Just to remind everybody what we're basing this around, this is all based off of the draft ed specs that I believe you have all seen from that February 21st. So, all of these square footage numbers have been incorporated into the plans that you will see today for Broadbrook. So I think this is a really good depiction of our situation at Broadbrook, which it's very positive. Basically, everything from the ed spec fits and meets the ed spec, or is actually over what the ed spec sizing is. You'll see a couple of these diagrams throughout the presentation. One thing to note about this is that the portables and the two sets of portables, one to the south and one to the west there, were done all within the past 20 years. So we will not be doing any major renovation in those areas, but we are suggesting reprogramming of those areas to kind of to fit into that diagram that we had just previously shown. And again, the relocation of the main entrance at the front of the building. There's no red on this plan, which is a positive thing. So getting a little bit more into the details here. Again, in that northwest corner, of this plan, that pre-primary wing would be kind of the first grade kindergarten A. In the primary wing, you'd have the second grade, third grade, and fourth grade, as well as some STEM and special ed sprinkled throughout. In the lower right-hand corner, the special ed wing, and then located in the center there, that gym, dining area, kitchen, media, art, music, and the FRC program. We are suggesting that the admin be moved towards the plan south of the building in this to really provide a lot more secure and visible entrance for this school. Instead of being tucked back around the corner, we think that this level of renovation here is warranted, and to provide a secure vestibule at the school, but to also improve some of the wayfinding when you show up to the school, that the entrance would actually be really located on that street side at that front side. Also, by orienting the plan this way, we're able to provide, for those that may not need to travel the whole distance, some entrances off of this east portion of the building into the special education wing, as well as into that FRC wing. All in all, Broadbrook is in a really good spot. We will continue to proceed to develop it a little bit further, but everything in here is, in a great situation. Some of the other minor elements, moving the media center to the northern side of that wing, get some better light in there, as well as the art rooms, et cetera.
Okay, so like I said, we're moving quickly through this. Like Matt said, we think Broadbrook is a fairly straightforward solution, and works well as a renovate to new. You can always go back and talk some of those details after we get through. The more fun stuff is the middle school, high school. And so what we're going to present to you are actually three options. We're going to show you two different approaches to a renovate to new. And there's sort of two extremes, which Matt will talk about a little bit, and then talk about a new construction approach. One thing real quick, you're going to be looking through this. One thing you'll learn about architects, if you don't know already, is we work up to the very end of when we actually have to present something or provide something. So we made some little tweaks and stuff like that. If everything doesn't align perfectly, the overall meat of it is still there, but you might find that you are that the slides and the handouts aren't perfectly aligned.
And we can get you a copy of
And
this,
yes, we will,
the
absolutely.
most recent one, sent out to you guys.
Yep. You want to go to the next one. So I mentioned there's going to be three options. With all the options, what we understand in working with the working group that we've met with a handful of times is there are a number of obviously very important requirements to this program. But what we understand probably to be the most important in this middle school, high school is the separation between the middle school and the high school. And we, as designers of educational spaces, we've done a number of these types of facilities. We completely agree with that, concur with that. And so no matter what the option ultimately is, it will endeavor to create that separation. I think you'll see that it's probably a little bit easier to execute that in a new construction than in a renovate to new, but that doesn't mean it can't be done in the renovate to new. So we show this diagram. We like to use diagrams to sort of simplify an approach, just to indicate that you would have a middle school academic area, a high school academic area. Those are very separate. And then there's going to be a center core that's going to contain some shared spaces because the program does have some shared spaces. And then also might contain like some of the public spaces that each of the different divisions have. So like the gyms or those types of things. The other thing to note here is that we think it's really important that there's a middle school entrance and a high school entrance for both arrival and dismissal, but at the same time that there's a common entrance. This is a community resource, and you guys are going to spend a lot of money on this, and there's real benefits to having this be a place where the whole community can gather. So we want there to be a sense of shared ownership with a central space. So you'll see that reflected a little bit in both the options. And we might return to this diagram a couple times too. So with that, Matt, I'll turn it over to you to kind of go over the two different approaches to the renovate as new, and then we'll talk about the new construction.
So as you saw from Broadbrook, we also made this kind of high level diagram for the middle school, high school. Again, tying back to the diagram Eric was just speaking about, one of our goals, bless you, would be to designate those, separate but distinct entrances to the east side of the school and to the west side of the school. By relocating that high school entrance to the west side, what that would do would be provide equity for the school, that no one has direct ownership of the front of this building. The middle schoolers, would have their entrance, and the high schoolers their separate entrance off to the west. Approaching the visitor entrance from the front for any of your events, et cetera, and guests coming to the school during the day, and then a dedicated event entrance as well, where we could really allow visitors to come in and kind of contain them within that central core of those shared spaces. So again, I said at a high level, this whole northwest portion of the building would be the high school wing. The eastern portion would be the middle school wing, and then you'd have those shared spaces and admin areas up to the southern side of the building. Planned south side of the building. Again, just to kind of tie everybody back to this are the numbers that we're working with from the provided draft ed spec. So that is all tied into these diagrams that you will see following. So Eric mentioned we took two approaches with this, kind of to the two opposite ends of the spectrum. This first approach, we're coming at it from the opinion of, all right, let's see how we can fit all of these spaces into the building size to the ed spec. There's a lot of green and a lot of yellow, which is good, but you'll also see off to the right side, there is 9 classrooms not placed, the middle school gym and the middle school cafeteria. To kind of drill into it a little bit further, there's about a net difference of 7,700 square feet. And what tends to happen with these renovate to new projects is because they are existing buildings, it gets a little bit more complex to take existing spaces like those science labs to the north that are yellow and try to turn them into 4 or 5 classrooms to start making up that difference. We honed in on the special education area. As you can see, we really want to make sure, Patrick has stressed the importance of that program to the town as well, that, all of those spaces fit in there and they are, it actually is a little bit oversized. And then getting into the physical education, again, pretty close to being even with the ed spec, but that middle school gym is not placed. And what that would potentially lead to would be, the need for an addition to be able to supply those additional spaces. And mind you, this ed spec process is an iterative process between us and CSG working as we kind of develop these options to find that spot in the middle, where it's kind of the happy medium between these two opposite ends.
Yeah, Matt, if I could, before you jump to option 1B, the takeaway here is, I think, to get all of the spaces in the ed spec at the square footage that the ed spec calls for, what this really tells us is that you would need to build an addition. And just keep that in mind, and not a sizable addition at that. So it's already a large building, and so that obviously poses some challenges as as we get into the state process. So that's just sort of the overall takeaway with this specific approach.
So now going to the opposite end of the spectrum, we took a look at this and said, all right, well, let's get all the spaces, as many of the spaces in from the ed spec that we can, and see what this looks like. It's a lot more red than that last diagram that you saw, unfortunately. And there is still a residual of the middle school cafeteria and the middle school gym. We didn't seclude those spaces for any specific reason. That was just, what didn't end up fitting in. What this leads to, as we kind of drill down into it, you still see there's still a delta of, not enough space, but this leads to those classrooms being a little bit smaller in size than what the ed spec calls for. So there's some potential adjustment that's going to be needed there and some balance to be found. Both of these options, I think, like you said, there's going to be a middle ground that's going to have to be found between the feasibility and conceptual design of this and that ed spec. Again, with the special education and student support area, we found a pretty good spot with that in the facility. And then again, with the physical education being that middle school gym. So to kind of summarize, again, that first option had all the spaces sized per the ed spec, and there was some residual that didn't fit into the building. This approach was trying to get as much as we could into the building. So all those classrooms are in there, et cetera, but it would lead to some smaller size classrooms. So now, after starting to look at that, then we turned our heads to a new construction option, which is an exciting thought. Back to this diagram that Eric had talked about earlier. This is one of our driving concepts through, as we were planning on the renovation is new at the existing building, as well as when we moved into the new construction thoughts. So the high school wing being separate from the middle school wing with those shared core spaces in the middle, and starting to try and create a new high school entrance, a dedicated middle school entrance, and a shared event visitor entrance at the front of the building. So this is what this could potentially look like. What we're thinking about here is that you could have a high school wing that would be 2 stories, as well as a middle school wing that could be 2 stories, and that core coming together, those more communal spaces, et cetera. But with their dedicated gyms, split by the auditorium, as well as the learning commons, your media center, and then that cafeteria with 2 separate cafes with a shared kitchen up to the north. There's also an opportunity there. We know your existing middle school and the high school have these lovely courtyards, so wanted to try and see if there was a way to get those in there as well for the school to be able to utilize. All the admin, again, being located up front. Those 3 dedicated entrances, really providing a lot of security and visibility out to the site. And it also grants us the opportunity to rework some of that parking for the middle school, high school, and for the way that buses and parent drop-off could circulate through the site. This would be the second floor plan. Again, those 2 wings being 2 stories each. And as you're looking at this, you're probably wondering, you're probably noticing that this building is landed on top of the existing middle school or the existing high school building. So we started to look at that because that's all part of this process of how could we potentially think about phasing this so that we don't necessarily displace students from the high school property. We don't have to worry about portables and the potential extra costs that come with relocating students for the extent of the construction timeline.
Yeah, Matt, real quick, some of the discussions that we had with the team was so assuming we're building on the high school site, that one approach would be to move all the high school students to the middle school site, which means temporary classrooms, probably temporary cafeteria. You're dealing with, I think, challenges with athletic facilities, obviously. And then some of the specialty spaces like the wood shop, the auto lab, those are very hard spaces to replicate in a temporary situation. They can be done, but it all comes at a cost. And so we sort of were challenged ourselves to come up with a way that could you leave the high school students in place while the construction of this new facility was happening, leave the middle school students in place, and limit the number of times people have to move. And so what Matt is going to present is just that. one thing to keep in mind is this type of approach probably takes a little bit longer in duration because you're sort of starting and stopping construction and demolition. But it probably is the lowest impact to the student body, the faculty, and overall the community. So it's just something that we sort of wanted to suss out the feasibility of.
Yeah, and we do these phased kinds of occupied constructions very frequently. And it is, there are a lot of ways to make that site safe during construction. So with this, the conceptual phasing of this would be that we would build the high school wing first, so both stories of that. We'd move, and this would contain all of the classroom and educational and special ed spaces required for the high school program per the ed spec. We would then move all those high school students into that wing and subsequently demolish a majority of the existing high school. That would then open up the space for us to build that core and shared space where you'd have both the middle school and high school gyms, the learning commons, et cetera, kind of contained in there. So now the high school is fully back up and operational. It's got all of the spaces that they are currently using now. After that would be built, demolish the remainder of the existing high school building, and then comes in the final wing, which would be the middle school wing, that two-story addition off to the plan left side of this image. While that's going up, you'd also be redoing some of the parking, and there's all of that coordination comes into the construction process. Be redoing all of the site while that addition is being built as well. And at the end of it, you then have a beautiful new school that meets the CT space standards as well. And there again, there's the second floor of those two wings with that shared, the roof of that shared space in the center.
If you want to jump back real quick, I think another feature of this approach is that we're not touching any of the athletic facilities on the west side of the site, closer to the river. So it's that
You can fix the tennis courts.
we can certainly improve them, but it's not a necessity to do this. And all of that can get sort of addressed in the program too, like fixing the tennis courts and all of that and but we understand that the track is new. So, we're not touching that. I think if we were to leave the building in place, then you would be over here messing with it, and that seems sort of off limits. So we thought, well, let's take a look at this phasing approach. I think that's pretty much what we had to talk about to you today. Again, this is sort of where we are in the process. Just to give a little bit of an indication of what's next for us is obviously we want feedback from this group and comments and answer any questions. We are in the process of getting some construction cost estimating done for these different options to understand how much it's going to cost. Keep in mind that's an estimate, sort of like cost estimate, statement of probable cost, whatever you want to call it, but it is just that. But that will give us a sense of sort of order of magnitude, especially when you compare them to each other, renovation versus new construction. And we can certainly layer things into that, like temporary facilities, compare those relocation costs, all of that. So we're sort of at the early stages of that process as well. And I don't know if there's anything else, Sam, John, Jim, to add to that, but if not, we'd love to answer any questions that you might have or try and provide some clarity.
Go.
Can I just,
Go ahead.
I do just want to add one more thing about this that I forgot to mention is the new construction also offers great opportunity for expansion in the future if need be. And locating it here, you could extend, to the north of this concept, to the east, to the west. It's a little, it's very open to what you could do. And we also thought as part of this planning exercise to highlight some of those technical programs that you have and bringing those to the forefront of the school rather than being at the back where they are now, and really start to celebrate that program that you guys have.
I'm glad you brought that up again, because one of the reasons we actually put the cafeterias towards the back, it's one of the biggest challenges when you're renovating older schools and adding classrooms is sometimes it's the media center, but more often than not, it's the cafeterias that end up being too small. And so when they're sort of buried, in a building and you can't really expand them, it becomes a real challenge. So we intentionally added, put those towards the back. I mean, that's also a great place to have some service access for deliveries and that type of thing. But it also would allow for future expansion if there ever was a need to increase the size of either the middle school, high school, or both. So yeah, thanks for bringing that back up.
So before we start with questions, I just want to mention two things. One, I know that completing of the ed specs has been a question that everyone's been asking. This was, I would say, somewhat critical in finalizing the ed specs. Because we can kind of tweak and adjust the ed specs. Now we're able to see on a laid out plan where spaces could be, what they're gonna look like, what sizes they need to be. It's a lot easier to visualize it on this than just a spreadsheet with labels of rooms and square footages. The second piece to this is we have to explore renovate to new and new construction options. However, we do at some point need to make a decision for the middle high school if you are going to go renovate to new or new construction. We can't submit a grant application for both in June. We have to pick one. I'm not saying that the decision needs to happen tonight, but it needs to happen relatively soon. So, that's all I'll say there. And then if you guys have questions, feel free to ask.
And with that in mind, questions that help you make that decision, like the advantages of each. We're happy to help add some clarity. Go ahead.
With this approach, are those shared spaces in the center? Is that one floor and then on the second, is there a second floor to that? Or is it the wings that have the second floors?
Just the wings.
Okay.
So these spaces here, and if you jump ahead, but these spaces here tend to be like the high volume spaces, like the
Right.
gym, cafeteria. You have an opportunity for a media center, which could be a double height type of thing. Especially the media centers are really interesting and I think a wonderful opportunity because it is shared. If you think of a library, like a public library, they're multi-age spaces. And so people are really kind of used to that. And so I think there are some great opportunities to, number one, make it a more public amenity, but also a place to bring this sort of unique program of not just middle school, but fifth grade, all the way through seniors, to bring them together in a really positive way. So that would be, we think that would set up well to make these really engaging and dynamic spaces. But it's a good question.
So you're proposing a media center as the middle school children and the high school kids can be in there at the same time?
That's what the current ed spec calls for, is one shared media center. The actual sort of design of how that space would operate, we're not addressing that level of detail right now.
Mhm.
But we would certainly continue those considerations of, sort of separate spaces. But again, I think there might be some opportunities for some combined spaces there. So it's really like the media center and the auditorium are really the two that are the publicly shared spaces between the two programs.
Do you need two elevators? One for each?
We would probably in this building have at least two. If not, you might end up with two on each.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to have that for redundancy. I don't know. You would certainly have an elevator on each wing at the very least.
Are the sizes of the gyms such that the high school could host basketball games and have spectators?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the size of the gym in the ed spec is roughly what the current gym is, right? Maybe a little
yeah.
bigger.
Around 8,300 square feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I would say is 8,000 square feet is probably the minimum size for a high school gym, and
Mhm.
so we would be right around there.
Okay.
Question. With respect to the renovate to new and the new, I know that you guys are working on estimates right now, but in order for us to help facilitate like which direction we want to go with that, on a whole, do you find it's more cost effective to just build new? Because you're not dealing with all the other stuff and the challenges that go along with it?
It's hard to answer that question because it depends on the extent of the renovation. And so if you go back to those two different options, the one that was all red
Yep.
actually has a lot less intervention, a lot less movement of walls and all that sort of stuff than the one that's green.
Mhm.
But keep in mind, the one that's green is missing 9
Yeah.
classrooms and
Yeah.
a handful of other core spaces.
Yeah.
So, I think the cost estimate process will flesh that out. The only other thing I will say is a renovation of this size and scope. The building code effectively treats it as new construction, which in today's day and age means you have to meet energy efficiency minimums.
Right.
And that almost always means that you are doing some major interventions to the exterior walls. And that can become really costly. We're doing a project right now in New Haven. It's about a 60,000 square foot renovation. And we're pulling all of the brick off the existing building and sort of building a new layer for insulation and waterproofing so that we can meet the energy efficiency standards that are required. So those changes to the code are relatively speaking new and have made that whole calculus of renovation versus new sort of trend towards new.
I mean, looking at this, I mean, I think it seems, for my personal opinion, it seems like it would be a better option to go new because just the ease of how everything lays out and the benefit to the community as a whole, it definitely segregates it. It allows for additional space to be added afterwards. Personally, I think that this is a better
I
option.
think another thing just to keep in mind and to add to your sort of thought process is that the high school building is a 50, 60-year-old building that was designed as a high school 50, 60 years ago. So now we're talking about a high school program that is a modern high school program. We're also talking about putting a middle school program into this building. So the building was never designed for that in mind. And so what we are doing, and we would find the optimal way to do it, if we were charged with that, that's what we would do. But will it ever be as good as a new construction that's set out with this type of unique program of combining 5th grade through 12th grade under one roof? Probably not. It's probably more optimal to build new. So from a purely functional programmatic standpoint, I think the new construction would have an advantage.
What is sorry. Let me ask people at the table first, and then I will open it up to, no, it's fine.
So when we're talking renovate to new, and we all need to get to a decision at some point here for new or renovate to new. If we're trying to renovate and it's already a challenge with the design of the building currently, if you're taking down walls and stuff like that for renovate to new, we're probably looking at redoing any underground utilities and stuff and start from scratch because it's 70 years old. So basically, we're almost going down to I-beams here.
You're going to structure.
Yeah.
You're ripping every system out. I mean, you were talking today that like the door hardware, the doors would have to come out. You're down to what you're saving are the foundations, the floors, the skeleton of the roof and the skeleton of the exterior walls and some interior stuff too, but finishes, systems.
Yeah, you're gonna have to take out a lot of concrete in the ground just to run new plumbing for the bathrooms, all that stuff.
Potentially, I mean, we would certainly look to minimize that, but yes, you would be doing a fair bit of that, yeah.
So, and I know this is just an initial concept, so not throwing darts at stuff. I guess I'm curious about parking, number one. Number two would be like the athletic fields. You know, I don't know who you're talking to in this group before coming here, how that gets steered or what's going on there. My concerns is space. So
Is what?
Space. So now you have a middle school and high school, double the amount of students in sports. We've already got this paid amount of space to begin with. We're moving the school back from where it was originally. Something I brought up to the group here and stuff is maybe utilizing some of the middle school, whether they're using its building for something else in town or whatever, keep the the basketball court there if we needed extra space for town, or maybe some practice fields where they could bring them up, but I don't see us having enough space at this point to upgrade what we have. And unfortunately, we have an amazing dedication going on for this track, but it's really 0.03% of what we're getting ready to put into this project. So I mean, if we had to scrap it and move it, I wish that would have been on the table for design here, unfortunately.
So let me make sure I understand the concerns with parking. It's not just parking during the school day, but it would also be sort of after hours event parking.
Yeah.
Okay, we can dig into that and look at the feasibility of that. I think we can
Absolutely.
work to understand what that number needs to be.
And if we have 2 gyms, which is amazing, that's great. We need that for middle school sports, high school, not just during the day. I guess I just worry a little bit about, are we gonna have enough space back there now that we're bringing middle school sports? We're really tight on land here.
Hmm.
So I think that's something we have to kind of look at too, is can we fit what we want to do back there, and also, or can we utilize maybe the middle school we have now?
I will tell you, based on just sort of some rule of thumb type of calculations and having worked on similar types of projects, in fact, bigger schools on smaller sites, that I think there's probably enough room here for the amount of parking that you would need.
Okay.
But we'll dig into that. And what we can do is, I think the next version is sort of provide a sense of how many parking spaces you could actually get. And then we can put that out there. And does that feel right? Not,
And I guess I'm just worried about like the sports field portion too. Is that basically off? That's not in your purview right now? Has it been told you not to be in your purview? We're just working on a building.
the whole site is part of this consideration. So we just haven't really dug into it much.
Get it? We're in the-
But we could certainly continue to, make, changes to the athletic fields depending on what the needs are. I think there's enough space. Another advantage to a 2-story in a more compact footprint is that you can, and there's nothing that says this has to be like this, right? Like, I didn't say this earlier, but this is the earliest stage of design and the least detailed stage of design. If you were to decide, okay, we're doing new construction, by the time you get into the next phase of design, which we call schematic design, that's really where we would actually take this and maybe not quite toss it out the window, but we would look at different configurations of this, and it might mean different places on the site, all of that. This is to test fit the feasibility of actually doing this. But that being said, we know that a smaller footprint going 2 stories gives us that opportunity, frees up more space on the site. It's not a huge site, but it's also not the smallest site we've ever worked with. So I think there's some opportunities there. All very good observations. So thank you.
I have 2 questions. First of all, so you guys are in the design business and looking at the potential for 2 stories. As I look at the map, and I have the wrong one up, but as I was looking at the map, it does not look like the second stories are connected to anything. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that would mean that you would have to have 2 elevators per wing in case there were a fire.
No, just
Not necessarily.
no, the elevators wouldn't be emergency egress.
Yeah.
It would be stairs.
Yeah, you wouldn't use
Or somebody
elevators.
in a wheelchair? Okay. So you would at least need to have 2. What's the ongoing maintenance costs for maintaining an elevator?
The question off the top of my head, we can certainly find that
Yeah.
out, but there is some. We can dig into that.
Secondly, the configurations on all of these, you're talking about kind of squeezing in the ed specs into the design. Do the ed specs conform with the state space standards, or do we need to right size the ed specs to meet the state space standards?
You guys want to take
So
that? Sam?
currently the ed specs are over the state space standards. I can get you the exact numbers. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I think looking at Broadbrook, I think we're
Right.
pretty close
Right there.
in terms of where we're at in terms of space, and I think we can fit whatever's in the ed spec into the existing building. So I don't think we have an issue with Broadbrook. What I think may be a little bit easier just in looking at new construction is you can right size the school and the ed specs to be more in line with the Connecticut space standards versus if you were to use an existing school, your existing high school is already over the Connecticut space standards. And using the ed specs and trying to fit that program into the existing school, they said that you're gonna require an addition. I don't know how that's gonna go over with the state, if that makes sense.
But if we go with new construction, we have to be in compliance with the state space standard.
Yes, but it'll also allow you to right size everything a lot easier if you were to do new construction.
Does the map that's on there, is that designed to the state space standards or
It's-
the ed specs?
Yes, the space standards.
That's,
It would be 104,000.
okay.
So that checks that box.
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, the advantage of the new construction as well, it's a lot more efficient. We're able to really design it. Again, as Eric mentioned, the existing high school is 50, 60-year-old school, and the corridors kind of wind and meander throughout. There's some very deep spaces in some of those wings that make it a lot harder to try and manipulate. If you do take a new construction approach, you can really streamline that design. You can make it super efficient. You can minimize how many corridors you have kind of sprawling throughout. You can probably see from this first floor plan, it's a nice solid loop with a couple of connectors rolling through there. Those shared spaces in the center that just kind of open the whole school up a little bit on the interior. So that's where you begin to find your efficiencies, especially with new construction, even as, with fitting into that space standard.
And Jason, one of the things that we had asked Patrick to do when we last met was look at the ed spec and find some efficiencies of those shared space, but also maybe some reductions to classrooms. I think it was you that made that observation that a lot of the classes that you've observed haven't really been the full, 24 to 30, 25 to 30 kids. And so sort of took a first pass. That certainly helps. I think we continue to look at that as we, move forward over the next month to find more of those efficiencies. So that was a good first pass and continue to work towards that.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Matt, so just so I make sure I understood correctly. So this design is within the recommended square footage, it's not over, and within this design, we wouldn't have to work with state legislators for
exceptions.
like space waivers of any kind?
So this, as it's drawn up on here, it matches what the CT space standard would be. That's not to say that there's still some work to be done with the ed spec to get that you'd have to get
Okay, so this
the
design
ed
doesn't
spec.
necessarily match up though with the ed spec.
Thank you. That was what I was.
Correct. It is
Okay.
sides to the space standard because my understanding, if you do go with new construction, they're going to be pretty hard pressed to make sure you hit that's CT space standard number.
So if we worked with that spec with understanding that's our need, we're still short based on matching it up.
Correct.
Good clarifying question.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to
Yep.
do.
Yeah,
Do you know by how much square footage?
Yeah, that would be.
I
Think the ed spec is at.
don't know off the top. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think it's in the 20,000 square foot range.
Like that.
So those are from the numbers that we've seen. Yes, I have it in here. I believe the draft ed spec was at 126. Yeah, 126,000. CT space standards is 104,499 or something. Get to the bottom of the space matrix.
like roughly, what are we talking about, that number of classrooms?
13 high school classrooms, and I believe there was 14 middle school classrooms. I think were the two numbers that resonate.
And those are general classrooms. So there's
Correct.
some science classrooms, obviously, and then there's some of the career technology education classrooms.
So, yeah, the current ed specs for the middle high school are 126, 788. So roughly 22,000.
22,000, yeah.
Yeah,
Sam, that was with the like the most recent reductions to some of
we didn't adjust it yet with those most recent
So it's
reductions.
actually-
It'll probably be a little bit less.
I think that trimmed about 3,000 to 4,000.
Yeah, that probably cut 3,000 to 4,000 off. So I think you'd be south of 20,000 with the first pass that you took. Yep.
10 classrooms then in each.
No, I don't believe we actually. I don't
We didn't
think,
cut the number of
Patrick, we didn't
classrooms.
reduce the classrooms. What we talked a lot about is kind of modern classrooms and how you can adjust the size of these classrooms. If you have, we got into a conversation regarding like some of these AP courses or courses that just don't have the student load of a general math classroom or English classroom, that you can have a 500 square foot classroom that could just as adequately, hold 10, 12 kids maybe. And it actually creates a little bit more of an intimate set, a better setting in the end, rather than having 4 kids in a 850 square, in a room, 4 kids in a room about this size. You're able to, then have 2 classrooms. If you split this room, for example, down the middle, you could have 2 smaller classrooms with a smaller class size and still be able to have just as equitable of a learning experience.
The other approach too is, and we'll continue to work on this, is looking at the utilization of every class throughout the school day. And can, where you might have traditionally had 12 classrooms because you had 12 teachers.
Right.
Can you get away with 10 classrooms? And where those periods are free, you might have a couple and we're seeing that a lot. Over the past, I would say probably the past 15 years or so, we've started to see this move away from this model of like one teacher, one classroom, especially at the high school level. The elementary school level, it doesn't really work that way, but at the middle school and the high school level, it can. Allows for a little bit actually smaller classroom too, because there's some of that planning space can exist somewhere else. You have to address things like storage,
Right.
and that type, but there are efficiencies in combining storage, and there's really great systems out there that allow really good organization of those materials. Obviously, textbooks continue to sort of be less and less of a thing. So there are ways to continue to find efficiencies in sort of a more modern K-12 type of building. So
just to reiterate what Eric was saying, the last 2 high schools that we've been involved with, Farmington High School and Norwalk High School, the old model of teachers owning their own classrooms is no longer. They share the classrooms, they work in teacher workspaces.
it's kind of the higher ed model, honestly. You walk into a collegiate classroom building and nobody really owns that.
Right.
So there's a little bit of more burden on scheduling, obviously, but you're saving on some capital investment.
I think my concern is I just want to make sure that we have adequate number of classrooms for the number of classes that we offer, and we're not going to have to cut any of that stuff based on this, but
For sure.
it does make sense.
So I have a question going back to Broadbrook School. You talked about how we would, with the kids, the high school, middle school, how potentially we could do that. What is the thought for the Broadbrook School? You're not going to be doing construction with the kids in the classroom, so how's that going to work?
We haven't gotten into that. I will say we've done that. We have done multi-phased occupied renovations for schools, and while the children have been on site,
They
they're
get like little hard.
yeah they actually very good at like getting into the tight spaces and the insulation in the walls.
Yeah.
They're not going to learn anything for a year, but they will actually.
Yeah.
No, it's feasible. I mean, there would be some costs for temporary facilities while those spaces are, but it could be done in a multi-phased occupied renovation. I think a lot of that discussion also probably comes down to the timing of these projects combined. So imagine if you did this phased occupy or this sort of phased approach to the middle school, high school, you freed up the middle school you could swing the Broadbrook students to the middle school and speed up the renovation of this. So I think there's probably a couple different ways to crack that nut. But at this stage, all of those options are on the table. There's probably also enough space on this site that you could have a whole bunch of temporary classrooms and sort of work through it that way.
I mean, yeah, doing it by wings,
Denise actually, Samantha, 2 years ago, finished up the renovation of JFK Middle School in Enfield, which was phased occupied throughout the whole.
Yeah.
Which you have 10 phases.
Yeah, 10 or 11.
And we just finished this past summer an elementary school in Newington. Again, it was fully occupied. We had to make swing space, create swing space within. We didn't get modulars or portable trailers or anything like that. We had to make space within the existing school and moved children around while we renovated the project.
One key to this is bookending the school year with full summers of heavy operation, heavy construction activity, first summer and last summer.
Right. And usually what we do for those summers is we'll do the gymnasium and the cafeteria kitchen. When you're doing the cafeteria kitchen, sometimes we have to get in there early and stay late, meaning take it over at the end of May, ask, hey, for the last 2 weeks of school, can you do box lunches? For the first 2 weeks, month of school, can you do box lunches? And that affords us the time to get that renovation done. That's usually the kitchen dining area and sometimes the gymnasium. But the gymnasium, for the most part, you can get done, usually bang it out in the summer.
What the total square footage of this is like 75, 76?
roughly.
Yeah, so
74.
we had a
Right.
project similarly. It is amazing what people can get done in the summer. We had a project where on the last day of school, like the teachers were gone at like 3 o'clock. They, from that day to a week before school started, they had crews in there and they renovated 50,000 square feet of classroom space in a summer.
Wow.
And what's nice about this one is it's not a huge intervention because it kind of works already. So again, I think it's certainly feasible that it could be done without moving the students off, possibly without any relocatables, but those are certainly different options to explore. And we can, I think, kind of suss those out in the cost estimate too, to try and give you guys a sense of the total project cost.
And you have to remember too, realistically, it's
Yeah, that's.
this area
Right.
that's getting renovated because this space and this space aren't really gonna be touched since they're less than 20 years old. So that kind of also reduces at least like square footage wise, the amount of work that needs to get done as well.
Or maybe Matt, I'm not sure who, what's the square footage of the build to new model at the high school?
Built a new model. The existing high school is 123,000 square feet, I
Yep.
believe. The existing building is
What's the square footage if it was new construction?
104. Or I think the actual number is 104,499.
Yeah.
We just offset your elevator maintenance by lower utility bills.
What was that? What was that?
126, 126 and some
788 or
change.
something.
Yeah,
It'll be a little less with those most recent changes.
yeah, 126, 788.
Yeah, your delta right now is probably sitting right around 18,000 or 19,000. Yeah, right in that range with those reductions that you made, Patrick, that we discussed.
Considering what you just said and the state or the shape of the proposed middle school, high school, new construction, would there be, energy efficiency wise, would there be the use of solar panels and other passive?
Certainly could be. There are, we aren't looking at exploring that as part of this exercise, but I will say that with pretty much every project that we've been on moving forward, we've looked at either net zero or net zero ready. I would add that by building new renovate to new and trying to be net zero ready would be virtually impossible. One of the things you have to have is you have to have a very low energy use intensity. So it's
Yeah.
the amount of energy you use per square foot, a very low EUI. And one of the best methods to get that is to design very specifically to the surrounding context. So you're being very thoughtful about where your windows are, what direction they are, the type of shading devices, as well as the resiliency of your exterior walls and your roof when it comes to resisting heat loss and gain. So all of that stuff. And then, of course, the systems themselves play into that. So certainly with new construction, you would have an opportunity to be net zero ready. We would have to do a study on if that roof is big enough for solar. It might not be. You might have to have some on-site solar, or there's other ways of doing it. You can buy off-site solar.
Geothermal too.
And then there's obviously geothermal as an option. Oh, you could do that for the renovation as well.
They could do net metering, right? They could do virtual net metering.
There, yeah, that's an option as well. Yep. So there's different paths you can take.
I just have one quick question. When you go back to the Broadbrook Elementary, you had said that the two spaces that we are less than 20 years, you'd reprogram them. Can you just speak quickly to what reprogram, and can you knock walls down to reprogram, or what is it? Just call it a different space.
It would be more or less just calling it a different
Okay.
space. We can't reconfigure the spaces. One thing, I mean, you probably will notice there is these two little pods here that would serve as, I mean, we potentially program them as like the special education offices, and that could be done with furniture or something of that manner. But yeah, the general idea is that nothing in those spaces would be able to be touched. It is just a room association.
Yeah.
It could be touched, it just wouldn't be reimbursed.
Well,
Exactly.
pardon me, yes.
That's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
our dollars, right?
Yeah, there'd be no reimbursement
Okay.
for any renovation done in that
And
area.
actually, that was the same situation at JFK, where they had addition, their library was less than 20 years old. So we had to stay out of it. We did do some minor, I think, paint, maybe carpet.
More like maintenance type of.
Yeah, but that was all on town's dime.
Okay.
But the good thing is that those spaces are laid out really well for what this program is. So I don't think there's a need to do it other than what Matt just mentioned about dividing up a couple of these classrooms to create some resource spaces for special education.
Okay. Questions from the table before I open it up to the audience?
I just had one more. With the design of the new construction high school, I know to go as far as a space, if you had to move things around, your current office,
Yeah. Yeah.
if we were to, well, move
Between
that,
the
do
two.
we have space in Broadbrook to house you guys?
No.
No? All right, just wondering.
But if we're short parking and stuff, how much space is there between the administrative building and the high school? There's a big field there, right? It could be looked
Well,
at
I
maybe.
can see it's superimposed on top.
On
It's
the
in the
north.
bottom right-hand corner there.
Yeah, there's that I believe that's the building
Yes.
you're speaking of. Yeah, this is all, I mean, this is all open. Again, this is just a kind of a first pass high level
Right.
at this one. We do go look at a little bit further. I think there is more opportunity to reconfigure how this would all function to provide that more parking if.
Because I was just thinking
Tired.
to Jeff's point with the sports field, if there's a way to fit in either because I know the middle school has a track program now and they do soccer, or they're trying to do soccer, and to try to do middle school and high school track and soccer at the same time.
I think there might be some potential there too. I mean, one thing maybe to fill out, and like if the tennis courts were redone, I don't know, maybe the use would be very popular. Maybe not, maybe that would be a better spot for a multifunctional like field.
Yeah.
I know when we had the ed specs conversation, that was part of the conversation as far as having like a multifunctional field.
And we could always show you some examples of some sites where, I mean, where you have either artificial turf or you're striping a specific way for a specific season. But, you can take a baseball diamond and create a soccer field out of it relatively easily. So we can show you examples of, again, we've done incredibly tight sites with buildings that are 3 times the size of this. And just with very sort of deliberate, careful site planning, you can create a lot of flexibility with your playing fields. I think one of the things we will probably want to define here shortly is what exactly those requirements want to
What
be,
those would be.
so that we can reflect those in these site plans moving forward. So both with the parking, I mean, if you guys have an idea of what your parking requirement is, that would be good for us. And I don't know, Sam, if it's in the ed spec or not. I don't recall seeing a parking requirement, but that would be a good place to start. Even if it's just adding up what's currently at the high school and the middle school together or whatever, but that would be good to have. And then the requirements for the athletic fields, and then we can make sure we reflect that in these diagrams moving forward.
There's still a baseball field that's behind
Yeah.
the track too.
That's
So I mean,
big,
yeah.
there's definitely.
There's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have specific requirements for parking in the ed specs. It just mentions like parking lot. You
Maybe
don't
we could get
typically
that from
call out
the
like,
guys.
I think the QAM master plan makes it.
yeah.
I would think adding the 2, almost adding the 2, except for, I guess you'd have middle school sport games possibly on the same day is high school might have at the same time, so you're gonna have that extra parking. So maybe, I think we do okay right now with the high school and middle school when there's actual event going on.
Okay.
Just think of when we had the concert with the pops. Then like you had kids there from the middle school up to the high school and all their parents, and that auditorium was standing room only. So, figuring out how many seats do we have and how many cars would we need to.
Like the elementary school right now, there's people parking on the grass, teachers
Yeah.
on a daily basis, or like in my yard.
Well, for the auditoriums, you have to remember the state will only reimburse an auditorium for, I believe it's half of your enrollment, right? So you're half of, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit. So it would actually be a smaller auditorium than our existing one.
So this one might be for Sam. So when, give or take, date wise, like when do you kind of need an answer from us? 2 parts. When do you kind of need an answer from us to go, whether we want to choose new or renovate, and how quickly we'll be getting estimates so we can deliberate over this stuff? Because I just don't want to be having one meeting, having an estimate, and then within a week, we have to kind of come up with a.
Yeah.
vote.
So estimates would be, I don't know.
Yeah, our estimator currently has this in his hands right now. Gonna probably give him another week or 2 just to develop all of this, and then we should have a decent idea of where we stand. Say probably at the most 3 weeks for Tom to complete those, because we do know time is of the essence with this, and obviously you need those numbers to make a decision. We completely understand that. So yeah, we'll keep the pressure on him and keep pushing him to get that.
Is it possible to get like the cost on as far as for both what that spec said and or the model? Is that a significant amount of work?
I mean, that's basically what he's doing now, more or less, because he has what GWWO already set him.
Yeah.
Based on like what they showed you. So that's kind of what he's.
So we're getting priced out for what the space is in the ed specs, or we're getting priced out for like the model that's 100 and.
So he's pricing out this model that's 104.
Yeah.
Right now, the renovate to new, he's pricing out, I believe it's
123, whatever, yeah.
Whatever the
It's
existing.
no, it's bigger than that, because it's the entire
Yeah.
building, which is 126,000.
Yeah,
So it's the renovation of the entire building.
Correct, yeah.
so that's what he's pricing out now. I'm
What are you
hesitant, yeah, I'm
trying to
hesitant,
get after?
yeah.
I guess I would be just curious, so we're saying we're like 19,000 be short based on that spec. What would the cost of that be?
Oh, if you went new construction at the square footage of the ed spec right now, what would what you would need to get the special
It
legislation?
would be the cost, it's not that you would have to pay that item. What ends up happening is your overall reimbursement rate gets
Total,
reduced, so you're
correct.
paying for the whole school at a reduced rate.
No, I understand that. I just,
Yeah,
still having a cost, I think would be.
because so if your reimbursement rate, say use 8%, but as a result of it being 20,000 square feet over, it reduces it down to 70%, you're out on that 10% of the whole project.
Right. But it would still be, I think, I would be curious to see what the cost, the whole, what are we giving up?
I think what we can
And at what cost?
do is, and I think it's probably a fair enough exercise at this level of detail, is to more or less extrapolate that cost per square foot for the 104 to the 124. That's going to get you close enough. I mean, we're talking order of magnitude here. And, anything less than $100,000 isn't really that accurate anyway. Because we haven't talked about materials and we haven't talked about systems and all that. So we're making assumptions, and our estimator will build into that contingencies to account for those assumptions. It's a fairly common practice. So extrapolating that cost per square foot to the larger project will get you a sense of what that larger project would cost. And then certainly Jim and Sam could run the formulas of the participation rate and what that ultimate bottom line is to the town.
Yeah, I mean, my hope would be that, like, I mean, obviously not to the, I mean, you would wish, but realistically, you're not going to get a space waiver for 19,000, but you would hope that you would get something. Working with local legislators, knowing that it's somewhere in between though. So, having both numbers, I think would be helpful.
I just want to clarify the difference between space waiver
Oh,
and
you did that, yeah, my error, yeah.
I just want to make sure everyone knows. So there's a difference between space waiver and going the special legislation route. So space waiver is something that gets sent directly to DAS at the state, which they house OGA, who's the Office of Grants Administration, who does all the school construction grants. What we've been seeing is they're not really giving out space waivers at that level. In order to combat that, I guess you would have to go the special legislation route, which is you'd have to go to your legislators and say, we're only allotted, just rough numbers, 100,000 square foot school. Ours is 120. Can we waive that requirement for us? So there's two essentially different routes to go down for
I meant
that.
special legislation, I'll tell you. that.
Yeah, no, that's
That
fine.
won't
I
be
just
like
wanted
the
to
last time I
clarify.
make that error.
No, it's totally fine. They're talking about the same thing relatively, but I just want to make sure everyone's aware.
I have a question. Are the decision between with the high school, the new or the renovate, is that a Board of Ed decision or is that an ad hoc decision?
Ultimately, it would be, I would say Board of Ed, because Board of Ed has to approve the ed specs and the ed specs need to reflect renovate to new or new. They don't need to explicitly say renovate to new or new, but they need to reflect the sizes and the spaces within whatever design you choose.
You need to align.
Yeah.
I do think though that the Board of Ed should have an understanding of what this whole group would like, because I think that we carry 4 votes here and I don't want us to be I want everybody's input, but I do think that the Board of Ed have a voice also. So I would like to know what everybody else thinks before we have our meeting for our Board of Ed.
I would think that whatever, certainly we'd be open to just making a recommendation, but I would be very uncomfortable having this group make that kind of decision.
No, I agree, the Board of Ed to make the decision, but I want everybody at this table to have their input when we have our Board of Ed conversation.
But I think it might be a bigger conversation because you have to take into account, obviously, whatever the Board of Ed wants to have, obviously, let's say, bigger school, there's cost impact to that to the town.
Right.
So you have to look at it holistically. Because everybody wants more space and bigger gyms, what have you. but there.
Want it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to balance that with
Yeah.
the cost and, can you get it through a referendum,
I think too, when we gain that understanding kind of to the whole question of more space, is understanding exactly what that means. Does it mean larger spaces or does it mean more classrooms, a larger gym, that type of thing? Because to sort of what Matt mentioned earlier, like we can, whether it's included in the official report or not, indicate where you might be able to expand this school for, in the future and defer that cost down the road. But if it's a bigger gym,
Yeah.
then once you build that gym at 8,000 square feet, you're not rebuilding that gym at 10,000 square feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just understanding what that really means. It's hard for us to hear, we want more space, because then we immediately say, well, where? What type of space?
Right.
So understanding that might help also sort of formulate the way that ultimately we communicate this concept plan, and maybe there's a future component, or maybe there's an alternate type of thing. So there's all sorts of different methods to build in some different options for you guys to. But the first step would be sort of understanding what that looks like in concrete terms.
Makes sense.
No pun intended.
To Grant's point, the other night, it's packed.
Yeah.
And maybe we go larger with that gym, but if we don't have that many people going to the middle school stuff, maybe that can be on a tighter space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, is like a lot of high schools will build a full-size gym for competition. Maybe it's 10,000 square feet. That's a large gym. You can put a lot of kids in that gym, a lot of spectators. And then they'll have an auxiliary gym, which is sort of like the size of like an elementary school gym, maybe it's 4,000 or 5,000 square feet or something like that. So
You find that in the larger towns.
Yeah.
For instance,
Right.
because it's difficult to schedule that many. For instance, we have Norwalk High School's 2,000 students. And they have a regular gym, full-size
auxiliary.
gym, and an auxiliary gym. And one of the reasons for that is it's just difficult to cycle through number of students who need to take physical ed. And fit all that in within a week's time. So that's one of the reasons why you do an auxiliary gym.
Yeah, so you could play that little game here too, is like give a little bit more space to the high school gym at the expense of the middle school gym. The middle school gym can still provide the physical education programming that you need, and could still probably, host basketball games for rec or that type of stuff. But it's not gonna be a competition space, but you don't need two competition spaces, right? Like one's enough. So those are other options. And
I'd like to, I know that you had a question. Could you?
So yeah, he asked the same question that I
Oh.
asked, so I'm all set. Thank you, I appreciate that.
No, anybody else?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, Jay, I'm kind of looking at the elevator issue too and the ADA issue.
Can you-
Right
can
now, I'm
you-
looking at the land use requirements.
Okay, all right.
But can you identify
No, you asked
yourself?
that question before.
Betsy, can you identify yourself?
Okay, that's in the
Just because,
16 Church Street, in Broadbrook. And, so I know that Jay kind of brought up the elevator, and I don't know what the ADA requirements are. But I mean, is it possible? I mean, we're thinking about shared space at the, in the middle part of the school. Is it possible? Do you have to have two elevators?
Code will dictate. That has to be.
you do not.
For each.
You do not. But
do
you
not.
could have one in the center that would accommodate both wings, or no, that would be tall.
center doesn't go up 2 floors.
Yes, that would be the issue. If you put it in the center, you'd have to create some circulation, like borders, to get people to the wings.
Right, but you have that space, you have shared space on the second floor.
No, there's no second floor in the center.
Okay, I see. And then the other question I have is just about cost. You talked about like, that more aggressive building that you might do in the summertime. And would that, even if there was overtime, would that cost be included in what you would be doing?
Well, in the estimate, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, our estimator would take into account that they'll take schedule, they'll take the scope of the project and then they'll sort of work up a model to determine. And again, I really do want to stress this, that the estimate you guys are going to see is an estimate. It's the construction, you may or may not have heard, but like the economy is kind of going up and down right now. And so nobody really knows what anything is going to cost in 3 or 4 years. But these are all just tools that we use to try and get a sense of that and to plan. And then as you get into the design of a project like this, you work with that budget, you work within that budget and you make decisions during design, whether you're above that budget or below that budget, as to how you might add scope, remove scope, that type of stuff. Happens on every project and just a little trickier these days.
anybody else in the audience that has a question, comment?
Denise, Noreen,
Yes, Noreen.
Noreen Farmer, 247 South Water Street. On the Broadbrook School slides, the layouts that are put on there, were those done based upon input from us, or is that just something that you kind of came up with? And the reason I'm asking is that the FRC classrooms are way over on the far side of the building from our smallest kids, the kindergartners and the pre-kindergartners. And those classrooms hold some of our youngest children during the school day. So I wasn't sure if we determined this somehow, Patrick or whoever, or if you guys just kind of laid it out like that by the ed specs.
We discussed the location of FRC with the team. And while nothing is a done deal, one of the advantages to that was the sort of direct access to the exterior and how it could operate somewhat independently. That isn't to say that they couldn't be located sort of closer to some of the pre-K and kind of we do understand those are the youngest kids. So I think because it's sort of an independent program, it seemed that was okay there, but it's always up for discussion still. Nothing's set in stone.
It's just that they're set so far away from the smaller playgrounds, which are the playgrounds that they utilize the majority of the time because they are the smallest children. So that just
do they use their own? Does FRC have their own playground? They use the
No, they
they
share the existing playground preschool.
Yeah, for sure. We can take a look at that. That's a good observation.
Thank you.
Anything else, Noreen? That's it?
Well, I have a lot, but that's okay.
And that's why I'm surprised.
It's got to digest. The pool and the tennis court area, could we look at that at the high school?
Thanks, Noreen. Anybody else online? Let's see. Okay. I guess you have like a wrap up, or are you all set?
Probably all set. I think next steps, we've already talked about it a little bit, is you have our professional cost estimator working through pricing up what the estimated cost will be. We are going to continue to sort of refine really all options and bring those up to closer to sort of the feasibility, the completion of that. I think the comments about parking in the athletic fields are really useful. We will incorporate those. I think our intent is to come back to this group at some point. Sam, I don't remember exactly what we said, maybe at the end of the month. Does that sound about right? Or?
Yeah, so in terms of talking about next steps, your regularly scheduled next meeting would be May 7th, right? And based on the time frame of the cost estimate, we would most likely have cost estimating by that point. So if we were able to get you that information maybe prior to that meeting.
Well, didn't you guys say that it would be a couple of weeks before?
We might have that I bet we'll have that information before that.
Because skating into May
Yeah.
is kind of
Yeah.
very tight.
Yeah.
Red has to have a conversation about that as
Yeah.
well.
Can this group convene?
We can have special.
Okay,
Special meeting.
okay,
Yeah.
I thought we have every other week.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
Yeah, we're
doing it every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
We only waited on this one because there's nothing.
yeah, there was,
Okay.
we were waiting for this information.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, that would bring us to April 16th. I don't know if Tom would be ready by then.
Let's do this if we can. Let's, we'll check in with, I think he just got the stuff earlier
Yeah.
this week, so we'll check in with him. So I mean, it's the second, today's the second.
Mhm.
So,
yeah,
yeah, I think that
that's 2 weeks.
probably the third week of April is probably realistic. In that, how many days would you guys want information beforehand? I guess is the question.
A couple of days.
Just a couple of days. Is that
Especially
okay?
too, if we're talking about ball fields and stuff and moving stuff around, or like we kind of talked about, we should probably also chew on some stuff and figure out some things we need, because you need information from us.
Yes.
Would that be part of the cost? Obviously would be part of the cost estimate that hasn't been included right now. So my concern would be, okay, we get an estimate from you, and now we're like, oh, what about the ball fields and stuff? And now so should we, like, if we did a meeting within, like, say, the next week or two and kind of discuss and through some.
For you guys,
For us, and then send it out to you.
the sooner you can get us that information, the
Yeah.
better.
So what are you talking about in terms of ball fields,
Right.
adding stuff
Athletic facilities.
to, I guess,
Probably, I mean, if we only have high school worth of stuff now, adding school, that's the reason.
I would imagine we're gonna need another soccer field, but if you
Yeah.
can
You're not gonna
take
fit-
a diamond and, I don't
Make
know.
it
or
into
something,
soccer.
you
somehow
can.
Creating that, you know what I mean, and being
Yeah, I
very
mean, when,
creative about things.
myself
but-
and, we met with, youth Samantha and, Fran, we talked about, for the middle school, like a multifunctional field. That could
Okay.
be,
Yeah.
like, exactly.
So do we think that's reflected in the ed spec now?
Should
It was
be.
part of the, I recall it being part of the conversation. I know Daryl was there too, but we talked about having, like the field that you guys just, I see it all the time. I have one in, like, near me, like it's a softball field, a football field, a soccer field. It has all the lines
Yeah.
for everything, and it can be used for anything, but it's all the same one field.
But are you looking at that to here? Is that what we're saying? Or-
Well, that's what I'm hearing, but I recall it being part of our.
But I mean, even if you were gonna do that, even if we were gonna keep the existing building, you don't have enough room to do that.
Add another field, or is it just repurpose some
But,
field?
but then, so that this is where I'm getting at. You have girls and you have boys. And now you're adding another school, girls and boys doing the same sport. So trying to coach soccer, let's say, and you're trying to get girls and boys on a field, you can't even do a full practice, right? So that's tough enough with just high school. Now you're adding middle school stuff to it. So how are we, to his point, to Patrick's point of having a multi-use field until we get it. But now we're talking about 2 schools, so you're not gonna fit 4 teams on one field trying to practice. So I guess that's where I'm getting at. When it comes to practice fields, it doesn't cost anything to line anything for soccer fields or maybe baseball. So like maybe we're going to the middle school and
Yeah.
setting up practices
Yeah.
there. But I think that's stuff we need to figure out now to give information to you so we know what we're doing.
Yeah, if that isn't adequately reflected in the ed spec now, then it would be better to have that now, and then we can, I mean, what you can say to us is these are the uses that we need. And you know, the seasons and all that sort of stuff, and then we can take that and look at the design of the athletic facilities and sort of come to a determination how feasible that really is with the site that you have.
Yeah, I mean, out of curiosity, just looking where the tennis courts are, I mean, our middle school doesn't utilize a huge amount of space. Is there enough room for another existing field there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could certainly relocate tennis courts somewhere else, or if you don't need them, you get rid of them. But
Just a small.
so what I would say is the sooner you get us that information, the better. It sounds like we can take parking counts from the existing schools and just kind of add those
Should be
together.
able to pull that.
So I think we probably have that.
I think you typically put athletic fields.
And then,
How long until we see a more, like, I know that ed specs have been fluid, but maybe a more finalized picture, but that's the.
Well, I mean, for Broadbrook Elementary, I think we can finalize those relatively quickly based on the design, but for the middle school, high school, it's really dependent on if we're doing renovate to new or new, because they need to align and reflect each other.
But with that being said, because we need information for the Board of Ed is able to give you that information, like, now that we have this whole conversation about athletics, like, is that going to be tweaked a little bit?
Yeah, I just need to know what you want me to tweak.
Well, I mean, at least for me, I know we're gonna need another field, so like for it to be in there, that there would be two fields, whether it's a multifunctional one or not.
Okay, again, like what I would need to know what the fields are. Like, is it a multi-use field? Is it just a soccer field? Is it two and I don't know if that's a Board of Ed conversation that they need to provide.
Yeah.
But
We have a meeting on the 9th, the Board of Ed. Maybe at that meeting, we can vote on our ad hoc or our ed spec for the elementary school. So that, because we have to vote on the ed specs, right? So maybe we could do the conversation at the 9th meeting for the Board of Ed for the,
We also need to see the final.
right, the elementary school. So at least that's
We
done.
don't have the finalized.
well, you have the most recent draft of both sets of ed specs.
Right.
So if there's any changes that need to be made, we need to review those with Patrick and Denise, and then those can go to the Board of Ed.
Can we vote on, if the elementary school is finalized and there will be no more changes to that, can we get that and vote on that? That way that's kind of done.
I'd have to
Or
see
is
if I
it
can get it to you by the
conjunction?
9th. I'd have to see if I can get it to you by the
Oh,
9th.
okay.
That's a week
Nope.
from
No,
now.
okay.
I mean,
I just didn't know. It's
Yeah.
not like that was done. So that's why. I was-
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's finalized, but I want to do one more pass on it. I don't want to just send it to the Board of Ed
Understand.
without having you guys
With
vote on it.
adjustments, those.
But that was to the middle high school, not the elementary school.
Weren't there some? Yeah.
Maybe
Was it the elementary school?
Elementary as well.
let's talk about the FRC.
Yeah.
CHT.
Or it's
The CHT.
Potential addition to
Yeah.
the ed spec for.
We did talk
Broadbrook.
about that.
Yeah.
And I thought a couple classrooms. were
It was all,
smaller.
that was all.
From base high school.
I'm just trying to check off some
No, we
stuff so
did.
that
Yeah,
we're
but
not having like a 5-hour meeting.
There was,
for the Board of Ed.
No, we added the two classrooms.
Yeah,
We added
but we did that already.
Third
We did
grade.
that
and-
already.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's already incorporated.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Into the-
There was 3 third grade classrooms and we wanted.
There were 3 third and 3 fourth, so we added those.
Yeah.
Those are reflected.
Yeah, we asked for the 2 classrooms added back and then CHC.
Yeah.
Correct, and
Okay.
the 2 classrooms were reflected,
Yeah.
the 2 additional classrooms were reflected in the plans you saw today. And there was some
Yeah.
loose space that the CHC could go, so that's not a concern.
Yeah, just a clarification, because like I know the conversations I've participated in, they've all been about really the interior of like the buildings and the space, without really having, the conversations have been limited as far as like parking, like traffic, like at elementary, so like talking about the fields, like I do recall the conversation taking place on the middle school, high school, although it's not like, but my focus and intention wasn't on in the ed specs, because I didn't see anything regarding outside facilities and any of the ed specs. So like going back to the elementary, like we have 2 existing playgrounds, like do those have to be part of the ed specs?
I don't believe so. Jim, can you comment on that? If playgrounds or like exterior of the building needs to be reflected in the ed specs?
Because we're talking about the field, but like, I mean, I haven't seen any outside.
You know, multi-purpose play field. Usually, yes, we do have that reflected.
Okay, because I don't see that in the elementary. I don't see like playgrounds, fields, anything reflected as far as what I've seen, unless I'm missing it somewhere too.
Okay, I mean, we could go back and add.
We're gonna be assuming using the existing or upgrade the place.
So that was part of my question. Will they get upgraded?
Yeah. I mean, that's, yeah, I would expect that that would happen.
Okay.
That the playground, the playscapes would be upgraded. You're gonna have two.
You would have a-
Because
you
of
would
the
have a-
age, because. of
Yeah,
the
an early
age.
childhood
Yeah.
and
Isn't there a
Denise,
playground? Yes,
can I ask a question about the ed specs for Broadbrook School? Back a while ago, we had gotten a Google Doc from Samantha, for Board of Education, relative to questions we had about the ed specs, and I had concerns that I had sent over. And I think you might have just touched on it. It got a little cloudy on my speaker about the third and fourth grade. We're going from 4 classrooms to 3 classrooms. Has that been switched back to 4 classrooms?
yes.
Okay, and then, so I had sent over a bunch of questions and whatnot about both spaces, and I never heard anything about any of that, so I'm not sure with talking about approving the ed specs on the Board of Ed side, that it can be as quick, a quick meeting, like in a week or something, when we haven't actually seen those revised ed specs.
So if I remember correctly, Sam did a sheet with all the questions
It
answered.
was part of a special meeting we had.
Yeah.
I can
It was the
I can
day that you were both
recirculate
sick,
it.
But
Yeah.
you were virtual.
I can recirculate it.
Okay.
There is a play area also in the Broadbrook ed specs.
Just one or?
What, it says 1 outdoor play area with age appropriate equipment.
So my question was, isn't there a play area at the middle school?
There is, yep, a small fair.
There was a slide and.
No, actually, no, yeah, there's basically swings. It's, play area might be.
Other parts of it have been removed recently, so I believe it's just.
For safety, yes.
That's because I was asking Kenny the same question.
But is it something that's
There
needed?
was any need for a playground for 5th and 6th grade.
Okay.
All right,
So I think what our homework is, other than, finishing the concept design, would be to give you guys some dates for us to come back to talk to you, and we can work with you to make sure that, so the date of meeting and when we would expect to give you materials to review beforehand. And because we need to look at, we're looking at that end goal, right, which is the submission to the state. And so we want to work back from that and make sure we place that right, rather than just tell you something here today. But we'll come back to you tomorrow or Friday with that proposed sort of refined schedule as to when we could come back here and continue this conversation and have some budget numbers and that kind of stuff to work through.
and in the
That's probably our
meantime,
next
this
step.
group needs to meet before all of that is really set.
Yeah, again, the sooner you can get us information about the exterior athletic facilities, the better off we're gonna be. I mean,
They're trying to get us numbers within 3 weeks. If we're waiting 2 weeks to have a meeting.
yeah, that's gonna be a problem.
That's
We
gonna be a
can.
problem.
Yeah,
So it's
no, I
gotta be
think it
within-
needs to be next week. But we can talk about that after.
And we can, I mean, we can feed, this can be sort of a progressive thing, like you can feed our estimators some new information.
Yeah,
And the thing about the fields is they're kind of off on the side,
yeah.
both literally and figuratively, so they can sort of isolate those costs and tweak them and even, maybe even give you a sense of if you leave it as, just working what you have, or if you sort of do a wholesale. It depends on what you guys come up with. So what I would advise is don't necessarily at this stage be restricted by that. We can restrict you later by the realities of both space and money. So I think at this point, let us know what you need and then we can work from there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Samantha, what all of this brings to mind to me is we have yet, and I know that we're supposed to wait until we have a firm idea to have a community conversation, but we haven't scheduled the community conversation. We don't have, and when does this group feel we need to get to that point? And
I think before you go to the community conversation, I think fleshing out having either renovate to new or new construction for the middle school, high school is important. Maybe you could have a community conversation just on Broadbrook because that seems to be in the best shape. And then do another one later on for the middle high school. Again, I'll leave that up to you. I had them tentatively in my schedule. I had one on June 5th and then one on August 21st. But again, those can be adjusted and moved. That I just kind of picked some dates based on where we would be in the design.
I thought we were supposed to have one in like March.
I talked to Joe and Jason about it and we didn't have anything to really go to the community with in March. Right? Like we didn't have the conceptual designs.
I don't recall that conversation.
Oh, I talked to Joe about it.
Joe's not Jason.
So Joe decided?
Because we were supposed to have it at the beginning of March or.
Yeah, it was March.
Yeah, so.
I guess we'll have to have that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, we didn't finish the specs or.
We didn't have anything
Right.
to present to them.
I know, but we didn't have that conversation. I mean, we need to have that, you need to have the conversation with us, not with Joe on the side, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, we need to,
Well, I think she probably needs to understand like where the direction needs to come from, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people
yeah,
in the mix here, so I mean, to her defense, I mean.
yeah. No, I'm,
Oh, no,
I'm
I'm
not
not saying
saying-
you are, I'm just saying, in general, we should
Yeah.
probably say, hey, take your orders from that person. I think early May would be a good time for us to have a meeting. I think by then we'll have fleshed out those things.
I mean, it's up to you guys.
I'm not sure if we're supposed to have a conversation because they did say to have some firm idea. How firm an idea is having a built to new or a new building firm enough of an idea to present to the community. Here's one and here's the other for the high school, middle school. And here's Broadbrook, which is pretty well set. But do we go to the community with two
I think if we go to
firm
the,
ideas?
I think early May, we'll have made that decision based on Board of Ed. We'll have had 2 meetings between now and then they'll have given us the estimates by the 16th. If we're meeting next week also as a ad hoc, I would imagine by the time the 7th comes around, they'll be still drawing and doing things, right? I don't know.
I think it's really challenging to engage the community until you really have a cost.
Yeah. that's all.
I know we talked about Broadbrook, but we did have an open meeting. The discussion was on Broadbrook, I mean, specifically about fifth grade, but updates on the project were given. Substantially more information since that public meeting. On Broadbrook.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are, most of the conversations, I mean, whatever works for everybody, but I do think that the more information we start to get out there, I think the better it's gonna be for us at the end of the day with getting interest and stuff. But I do agree, we need to make a decision and have pricing.
Okay. Just in terms of, is it still okay for us to kind of add to or no? Sure. Yes.
You have a question or you have a?
Well, I just have a comment. That's in Boreas, 16 Church Street. And the one thing that I would be concerned about, just for us to consider overall, you know, in terms of what we present, if we present it separately, it's going to seem like the referendum may be separate. You know what I mean, as far as going forward. And if we are really, you know, if we're going to do both projects, I think it would be good for the community to say, this is what we're doing, rather than take it apart. Because then I think in people's minds, they think it's 2 separate pieces.
Yeah.
So I would not want to start that, you know, that thinking for the whole community. It's just my input.
Thanks. So I guess we're all set with you all.
Okay, so we.
Thank you.
We're dismissed.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome this time.
They're gonna get you guys,
Yeah.
You know.
I'm not here.
They are, you're not. It's up to you. I'm not leaving.
Get away. I don't see a meeting on my calendar.
I still have someone here on the agenda.
What do you do with that?
The 16th.
16.
So what anniversary?
We're gonna move on to legislative update.
I mean, I can try my best. So on the 18th, it was myself, Denise, Jason, Joe, Sauerhofer, Samantha, we did Harper, that legislative building. We met with Jamie Foster, Senator Anwar, Carol, Paul, regarding just like an update as far as where we are in our renovations projects. And just want to have a conversation regarding some of our challenges with reimbursement and space, because that specs aren't finalized. So it's really just an introductory conversation. Certainly, it sounds like they will advocate on our behalf for special legislation. What that really looks like, you know, is to be determined. But it was a promising first discussion.
Oh, Sam was as well.
Yep. Yeah.
One of the things that the senator suggested, which was a surprise to us, the Board of Ed was brought up to date on that, was combining our school with Ellington. And he strongly suggested that Patrick have a conversation with the superintendent in Ellington, which you had, right?
I did. So I did call him. Senator Anwar did say he was going to reach out to the superintendent at Ellington. It's my understanding is that Ellington is looking to build a new high school at some point. It's been something that superintendent has advocated for the need to move in the direction. It's unclear where the community sits on that. So when I did speak with the superintendent, Senator Anwar had not spoken to the superintendent. So he was hearing it from me first. It was a very short conversation. He just said, you know, he was going to need to follow up with their Board of Ed chair, which I certainly relate and appreciate, and indicating that he would follow up with me in a couple of days. So if we met on the 18th, that conversation was on the 19th, and there's been no communication since. We did discuss that at the Board of Ed. The intent was the board was to move forward with this renovations work and just move forward was my take from the board of Ed meeting.
I think that's what the whole. So we keep moving forward.
What's your question?
So that was the legislative piece, community survey results.
Yeah, so I'm gonna join the Zoom so I can show you. I believe, I sent the results to you and Patrick. Did you send those out to No?
I did not, because
Okay.
I saw that as just a brief summary, so I thought more was coming. If not, I didn't understand that was the finalized version to send out.
Okay, that's fine. I have to let myself in, I guess.
I'll let you.
Oh. It's not loading on mine. Okay. 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 So what I did was. Okay. So what I did was I kind of just summarized in general what the survey responses came back with. So in total, we received 214. 161 of those were from the online survey. 53 were ones that were filled out by hand and mailed back in. 49 of those 53 that were mailed back in were from households that didn't have any school-age children. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. The response rate was around 4% with an error margin of plus or minus 5.5%. So what I did was to make it kind of simple, because it was a lot of data to look at. I did it per question and I pulled what the results were. So the count means how many people actually responded, and then it calculated, or the survey company calculated the percentage of that versus the total respondents. So question one, in terms of who's aware of this effort, a majority of the people that were responded either said that yes, they were aware or they were somewhat aware. So that's positive that the community knows that you know, these conversations and projects are happening. Question two, how important is it for you to have current and future information of the project sent to you? Again, majority of people felt that was. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is there any way to know, like, of the 50% of people who were in paper and did not have school-age children, like, are they accounting for like 90% of the no's? Like, is there any way to?
They didn't break it down in that much detail for me. I can see if I can get that, but I don't know. I think they just do it based on responses. I don't know if they go delve in deep to that. But yeah, that's a great question. So I lost my train of thought. Oh, so majority, it's okay. So majority of people that responded also found that it was important for them to get project information sent, which is good because now we know that the stuff that we're going to send out to the community would be read and received to some level, right? Question three, oh, that's still question two. So I must have duplicated. We'll go back to that. How have you been to any town or board meetings? A majority of people have not. I think that we kind of all expected that, right? So question 5 is interesting because it looks at the priorities of what people felt was important in terms of updating the school facility. So 1 being the low priority, 5 being the high priority. And it looks like a majority of the responses were improvement of the non-classroom facilities as well as security and safety.
What's that?
Yeah, so sports, music, arts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Samantha, I've got a quick question. The
Mhm.
security and safety, is the design team like putting into perspective, like all the different school changes, like the regulations and stuff on
Yeah.
entrances and windows?
So
and stuff like
that typically, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that typically gets accounted for. Since Sandy Hook, there's been a lot of code changes and, you know, safety requirements have been updated, such as not having operable windows anymore. Glass being, you know, a certain type of ballistic glass in certain areas.
Yeah, so what they'll have the designers will have to follow what they call the SSIC, State Security Infrastructure Code, which was the result of the incident. So they take that into account in their design. We have to be police, we have to be fire during the design process to make sure that they're aware of what we're designing. We try not to do that publicly.
Yeah, understood.
You know, we do it, you know, directly with police and fire and talk about what's important to them and how they want to, how they have to approach the building.
Okay.
And make adjustments as needed.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Just a second, if you go back to that slide for a second. You have C and D are the same thing.
yeah, I'll adjust that.
Same, I, presentation.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, no, I know. I'll send it to you. The other thing that I found interesting is what people's responses were, under the other category. So again, I can't see who said what, right? But like, we were just talking about Ellington, someone mentioned school regionalization. Actually, two people mentioned regionalization. Fiscally responsible spending. Then you have test scores must improve. So there's a lot of varying responses to this.
We should put walk paths and bike path downtown.
Air purifiers, someone commented lower taxes. So but I mean, it was an open-ended response, so you're gonna get a bunch of different responses. Yeah, so there's that. In terms of getting information, based on this, it seems that Facebook is the main way that everyone gets their information from. So I think that means that we should maybe set up a Facebook page. Because it seems like that's where people prefer to get their information. Some of the other responses, as I was reading through, were mail-in information and email newsletters, I think would be important as well. So again, this is kind of just like a broad range of, like I said, Facebook and going through the where people want to get their information from. This was one of the questions on there. How many years have you lived in East Windsor? Majority have lived in East Windsor for over 20 plus years, which is good to know. Majority of people actually rent their house, not own. Majority of the respondents, which also surprised me too.
Surprised by that.
And then employment status, looking at if people are working full-time or part-time, obviously that was the majority. Second most being retired, and then a few, being stay-at-home, not currently employed, or students. And then this kind of looks at who attended or who has kids in the East Windsor public schools. So it's interesting that a majority of the respondents don't have kids in school. Yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Yeah. And then we asked what grades that they were in, or if they were out of school or out of district, private or other. Yeah, so interesting. And the one thing that it didn't account for this survey, and someone pointed it out, is if someone had like multiple kids, what grade levels should they put? So we didn't account for that in that survey, but that's something we can consider for the future.
Are those percents correct though?
They should be. I got them from the report, but I can double check to make sure.
Or maybe I'm not understanding it. So the number of accounts why would 9 be 53%? What am I not?
Ooh. That might be a math error on my end. I can
Okay.
get that adjusted.
Okay.
Then there was a comment section where people can kind of just input whatever additional comments that they had. So I took screenshots of the replies. I highlighted them, or a few of them. So the yellow highlights are people who felt that they were in support of school upgrades just based on their comment. Pink is just if people have questions. And then blue was what people would prefer if they were to indicate their preference. So again, I can send this to you guys for you guys to read out. But the white was either people who weren't in support of it, their comment just didn't really, like someone just says like pre-K and grade 2 students. I don't know what that really means. So there's some comments like that, or comments like recommend monthly emails or that type of thing. Or someone said like, I have children in grades 1 and 5. I don't, maybe because they, yeah. But again, like I don't have copies of everyone, at least the online surveys, I don't have copies of that. And some people just put their opinions on here too. So you're gonna get a mixed bag of everything. And there's a few pages of it. Some people indicated repair items are necessary. Some people wrote a little anecdote about how they feel that they don't have children, but they feel that updating the schools is necessary. Again, school improvement is vital to the community. All the buildings need to be upgraded. So I just highlighted some of those because it shows that at least majority of people I feel are in support just based on this survey. So
Middle school makes you think that they didn't realize that it's gonna be, like go to two schools, so.
yeah. So I know we were talking a little bit about schedule too, and we'll adjust some of these dates based on GWWO and them coming back, but this is what we tentatively had planned out in terms of getting decisions made, presentations, things like that. But now knowing that the cost estimating is gonna be, within the next couple weeks, I'll get back to you with a revised one based on what I talked to GWWO about, so we can get kind of some further date, the date's a little bit more refined than what I have here. But that was all I had for the survey results. So based on that, I think the next steps are, we'll work with our communication specialist to get some more, to get another mailer drafted up.
What is there a way, because I was just surprised when you, how much does it cost to have like pre-posted, prepaid, so that people don't have to put a stamp in order to send back their response?
I don't know how much it costs, but we went to the post office and I forgot what the exact issue was, but the post office here didn't do like a bulk return mailer. So that was we just couldn't get the permit in order for them to get the mailer, the bulk postage. Yeah, the prepaid postage. Yeah.
And I bet you would get a better return.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, there was I don't know why they wouldn't do like a bulk return mailer or
You
whatever.
went to the Broadbrook post office?
I think Jason went to the post office, not to.
Yeah, they said they don't do it. They
That would
said,
be why.
yeah, they're like, I mean, it's like.
I don't think he heard you.
No.
No, I'm saying because you went to the Broadbrook post office.
Yeah,
That's why.
yeah, they said you gotta go to Weston Street. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you. I guess additional next steps is we need to look at a mutually agreeable date, maybe next week for us to meet again. And I know we all have like five meetings already, so.
Tuesday.
Dance and track the,
We actually don't
As well
have
as
any board of ed
baseball?
meetings on the 16th.
We have policy.
my wedding anniversary.
Shocking.
Oh, so next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have Board of Ed. We have finance before, so we really can't even do like an hour before. Thursday you have selectmen? No, that's this
Budget.
week.
So.
Budget on Monday, Thursday.
That's what. Make a determination on what they're putting forward.
Oh. Yeah.
I don't think, if you guys can't do Wednesday, I don't think next week is gonna work.
Before.
We
Board
have
of
a
Finance
well,
Subcommittee.
we could change that, I suppose. I know this isn't a popular idea, but I have done it in the past. Both as selectman and Board of Finance, where we did a Saturday morning. It's less restrictive. You can come in for 9. I'll bring donuts and coffee and we do an hour meeting then. Is that a possibility?
If it's that early, I can do it.
What set are we talking about?
Are we talking the 5th or the 12th?
Either one.
I can do the 5th. I can't do the 12th.
Does anybody?
Fifth is in 3 days.
Oh, you know what, maybe if it's early in the morning, I might be able to do the 12th. It's my son's birthday.
Are we saying we can't do next week at all?
We've got Board of Ed stuff. And then the 12th was,
Just to kind of go over, so we're meeting because we're talking about maybe some parking, something about the sports field, any little extras that we think we need to kind of put out to them.
We could do that.
So
I'll
the-
draw some stuff up if I get a chance to, you know, I've already played on the GIS map and mapped out fields and stuff like that already, so just trying to figure out spacing.
Well, do we want to, I mean, is there anything else that we need to discuss besides that? Is it something that if Jeff has an idea that you can get around to, you could send it to me and I'll forward it to everybody?
No comments, so.
Oh, yeah.
What I was looking to do with the parking is just go on the GIS map, we're gonna count up all the parking spaces. I think we're pretty good. It looks small, and obviously it's the very first concept.
Yeah.
That's not a biggie. Just making sure that they can do that. If they can place this wherever, they could probably put them all to the right side. And then maybe move the tennis court, something over here. I mean, it's still up for grabs to do a lot of stuff. But I just want to get enough
Yeah,
space.
again, it doesn't have to be finalized now.
Yeah.
But I do understand what you're saying, and I did talk to him about the possibility of the field on the middle school wing side, because they scoot the building over.
On the
just
side,
here.
yeah.
You have that huge parking lot that we could just tear up and create a field.
Yeah.
But
And looking at it too, if we're getting rid of the building in the front, it's an initial concept, they could take off half of it, right? Have the students the other half, because it's already twice the size it's supposed to be, and start using that square footage right there to build. In the picture we're looking at now, we sit up here, we could be moving it down here, creating more space. I mean, there's 100,000 things.
And again, this is just a concept designed to get us to an estimate to submit for a grant application. Now, once we submit that grant application, yes, that's our estimate. But the design, you know, the ed specs, the amenities or the layout of the building can change. As long as we're meeting the ed specs and the budget, how we get there can be different than what they're showing.
Just getting the referendum in this town, in this small town, having as much info as possible. You get them to pass it,
oh, okay.
having all
That's
these
just
things that are.
another aspect of it.
That's the part, is trying to have all that ducks in a row.
Objections, I would say we should just not have that one.
Denise?
Hold on a second. Yes? Sorry,
About-
go ahead.
You're trying to schedule, we could push the Board of Finance subcommittee by a week as long as we get that next week. I'm not sure who's on the schedule for that following week. We're doing projections, so we need to be able to get that done by our second meeting.
Yeah,
So
I was
you
gonna.
can push
ask about
Board
that.
of Finance subcommittee out a week.
Yeah. So
It's just a
that,
thought.
time before.
That's not an option.
And that would mean there's a hard stop on Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Would have to be.
Well, we can post, we've posted.
That's fine, that's fine.
I don't think it would be a long conversation anyway.
I mean, I'm open
It's
to,
important.
I'm open to moving finance and then just canceling this if our regular meeting if we have to, and then just not going all night.
Oh, no, we're not,
No,
we can't go every night, all
Yeah, I mean, it
night.
sounds like that we would really only put one agenda item on there.
Yeah.
I would just look for an agreement of what do we think we need, what we have now, but now that we're gonna have new schools, and we think that there's gonna be more people moving into town. Patrick doing an amazing job, things are going well here, and gonna have more people, make sure that we're gonna be set up for those facilities outside without hamstringing themselves. Again.
Well, not just outside, inside too, because I like the idea of the new, because the way it's set, you can expand if you
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
down the road.
And again, if we don't have a ton of, again, I'm all for having practice. I don't know what your plan is or what you're thinking about. You know, if something happens there.
White page.
But again, I'd love to see the basketball court still there. I'd like my kids to be able to play there in the winter, so we could go down there and hang out, keeping that court in there if we're gonna keep the building. But using all those as practice fields, again, lining it with having, you know, we're making soccer lines or
Multi-use,
baseball
yeah.
lines. It's just, you can go up there and we can do practices. If there's, maybe the high school stays at the high school, middle school, if you get bussed up there, they gotta get bussed home anyway. So it's not gonna cost anymore necessarily, right? So I mean,
Have you done the board?
Yeah, yeah.
but I mean, parents are picking them up from there. I mean, it gives us more flexibility in that cost. Fields as opposed to build.
So the only reason for having a meeting would be to discuss that.
Yeah.
So we should be able to do that
fairly
in a
quickly.
very short amount of time. So Noreen, if you're still okay with us canceling the finance or moving it a week, then we could do this special meeting of the ad hoc committee and get that out of the way fairly quickly.
Which we're talking about the ninth.
And then we have our regular board meeting.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mary,
that's
take that.
fine, as long as we just do it the next week, so we need to do the projections to the board in April, so Patrick, whoever's scheduled for our following Wednesday needs to,
Is that following Wednesday, the 16th?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not around, but you'd still